Traumatic brain injury can range anywhere from a minor concussion all the way up to profound and permanent brain damage.
What is a traumatic brain injury? And if you have a loved one who suffered one, what can you do? Well, that's what we're going to ask the lawyer on this episode. Hi again, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal from AskTheLawyers.com, and my guest is attorney Claude Wyle from the firm of Choulos Choulos Wyle in San Francisco. Claude, thank you for making some time to answer our questions today.
Rob, thank you so much for having me.
So let's start with the definition. Tell us, what is a traumatic brain injury, or TBI? What is it, and what causes it?
Well, traumatic brain injury can range anywhere from a minor concussion all the way up to profound and permanent brain damage. There's lots of different names for it. A TBI, you've got mild TBI, MTBI, moderate, and severe. And those designations basically just have to do with how long somebody is unconscious. Although within each designation, there are variables, and there are, frankly, just a world of variables, because brain injury, as much as any other injury or more, is so dependent upon the detail of the disability and the loss of function, whether it's temporary or permanent. It can be the most minor, smallest thing, like, wow, I just can't figure out the tip in a restaurant. Or it can be something like, oh, I have no sense of smell. I can't move the left side of my body. Or what was the question? Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
And it happens, what, when the brain gets jostled inside the skull, in layman's terms?
Traditionally, what happens is, let me explain to you the anatomy a little bit. We've got a brain inside a skull. The skull has got many bony ridges, and the brain is very soft, gelatinous material, and it's got a lot of liquid in there, and there's blood in there. And if the head is shaken or suffers an impact, say on the pavement or against a headrest, or even just hit by something else, the brain sloshes around inside the skull. And what happens is the brain gets bruised, can have bleeding, or can even be damaged on a microscopic level that we might not even be able to see with a regular MRI or a CT scan, but the disability can be real and profound.
I would imagine, as an attorney, it can be difficult to handle a TBI case, especially if your client, if the person who suffered the TBI has a completely changed personality, or may have a lot of functions that are not working because of the TBI. Talk a little bit about that challenge and how it takes a special skill to handle that.
Well, we at our firm are very, very committed to helping people with brain injury, because when we started practicing, when I started around 37 years ago, our senior partner had already organized about 6 head injury support groups for families around the San Francisco Bay Area. So we were working right from the very beginning with people with profound brain injury. And one of the very first cases we took to trial was a case where a poor young man who had been struck by a municipal bus. As he waited at the bus stop, the bus came up onto the curb and hit him and dragged him. And I learned more about brain injury in 1981 than I did probably with the next few years put together. The difficulties in handling brain injury cases are many, but of course, not near as many as the difficulties for people who have suffered brain injury. I think it's very, very challenging to tease out these injuries and very difficult to prove them. A brain injury usually is an invisible injury. And even though we've got better ways to test now with 3T MRIs, 4T MRIs, brain scanning, brain mapping, these tests are better than they used to be. But really what we have to discern is the loss of function. Many times, a brain injury can be confused with an emotional injury or a personality disorder. And this makes it very difficult for the family members and even for the injured person to really figure out, well, what do they have? Because their personality has changed, but it might not be a personality disorder. It might be just something really normal from a brain injury. I'll give you, for instance, we handle people who have been assaulted and battered. I had a case for a nurse once, and she was attacked by a patient. And she had a minor brain injury and a major post-traumatic stress. Now, one of the functions of our brains is to try to comfort us when we're having sad feelings or stressed feelings. For instance, it's terrible today, but I know tomorrow it's going to be better.
Right.
Well, people who have compromised brains and brain function can sometimes lose their ability to talk themselves out of being in a terrible depressive state, or talk themselves out of being in a greatly agitated state. And it becomes a spiral, because then the depression or anxiety get worse, and the needs of a sharp brain become greater, and the person can really just spiral into a very, very bad place. It's important to have a lawyer who knows how to tease out what is brain injury, what is psychological injury, or rather to get the right doctors to try to tease this out, and to also recognize your client is not being difficult because they want to be difficult or just because they have a bad personality. Mm-hmm. The client's being difficult because they can't cope. Memory problems are a huge problem. And for us, we have to oftentimes repeat a lot of what we're saying, try to help our client with different ways of remembering, of writing things down, so that we can help them and work with them. And I think with brain injury cases, we have to work a lot more closely with our clients, because really things that they could handle before that would be normal for you and I, really they can't handle anymore, just because of even a slight difference in their brain function.
And just the last couple of things you said, Claude, make me think it's very important in these kind of cases to have an attorney who is experienced working with TBI cases.
Well, sadly, I've taken over many cases from lawyers who were not well prepared to deal with TBI cases. And I found myself, and my partner George has found himself, really undoing the bad work of somebody else. You can do a lot of damage from the beginning of a case if you don't really know what you're dealing with. There are only a small amount of lawyers in the San Francisco Bay Area who really understand brain injury, who really understand the kind of doctors you need to connect to your client, not only to prove our injury, because that is the challenge of the lawyer. It's my job to be part of the financial recovery team. Mm-hmm. It's my job to be able to prove and present the brain damaged person's case, to present what has happened to them and how does this affect their life. That's our job. But in the meantime, before it ever goes to trial, we have to try and help our client just cope with and function in today's world. And sometimes that is getting them the right therapy. Sometimes it's getting them into the right facility. We work with some of the best facilities in the country. No matter where our client is, they can go to different states. We have often good facilities here, right in the Bay Area. But we need to work hand in hand with these facilities and the therapists and the doctors there to try to make sure our client gets the best recovery they possibly can get. Brain injury is terribly slow in healing, and we all have to be very patient with our clients and loved ones and patients.
It would seem to me that sometimes you probably don't have clients who come to you specifically because of brain injury. They come to you, maybe they were injured in a collision with a truck or in a motorcycle accident or whatever, and then you because of your experience, you figure out they also suffer a brain injury. Would that be the case oftentimes?
Interestingly enough, most of the people who come in with a mild traumatic brain injury are in somewhat of a state of denial. You've really got to ask the right questions to tease out if perhaps why they're depressed, or why they can't function on certain things, or why they can't do their job as well, might be the function of a brain injury. I had one client who was rear-ended on his motorcycle, and he went out of his way to tell the people in the emergency room that he was just fine. He wanted to get out of there. He wanted to get home. And the reason was because he had 7 motorcycles and his wife hated them. Wow. And he knew that if he let anybody know his brain was fuzzy and he had a concussion or a brain injury, his wife would take away all his bikes and not let him ride again. So he was so passionate about riding. He told the people in the emergency room, including the doctors, that he was just fine. Well, he wasn't just fine, and he ended up losing the next 3 jobs. And it was up to me to try and reconstruct his medical history and try to figure out how I could prove how his brain had caused him difficulty doing his job. He could talk like you and I. Mm-hmm. He could function pretty well. He was a bit more emotional at home, less patient. But at work, because of the demands of his job, he couldn't do his job anymore. And at the end of the day, we were able to make the person who rear-ended him, their employer, accountable. And he received full compensation for his brain injury and for all the money he was going to lose in the future because he wasn't able to do that job anymore.
Claude, they can be very complicated cases. I'm sure there are a lot of expert witnesses involved and that sort of thing. What if someone's thinking, I can't afford all that in addition to everything else that's going on in my life? What is your answer there?
Well, it is very daunting. First of all, when somebody comes home from a hospital stay, the bills are going to be very, very high, and that is very scary. For a brain-damaged person, for somebody who suffered a head injury, that can be even more stressful and very difficult to even cope with. It's important to get a lawyer early on so that the lawyer can help interface with the bill collectors and try to sort out what your insurance might be and what possible avenues of recovery you might have, not only from the person who hurt you, but also through all of the personal insurance, employer's insurance, public benefits that you might be able to get. There are facilities that can treat on a lien. You have to have a lawyer who has access to the companies who are able to help, who actually will help, as opposed to just warehouse somebody and make a lot of money. We've been working with head injured people for so many decades that we try to keep up on all the good facilities and doctors and therapists who can actually help put this person's life back together again as much as it can be put together. And if we're hired early, we can take a real active role in our clients' well-being and recovery. Normally, in most cases, we take an active role in being able to financially compensate them through a claim against the person who hurt them. But in head injury, you actually have to take an active role in trying to help them get the right treatment. I think that's a very important part of what we do. And I think any lawyer who is not well-versed in brain injury will simply miss that step, and the client will suffer thereby, and certainly the case will suffer thereby, and the client won't be able to collect as much in compensation, even if they've been hurt badly.
And you can take these cases on a contingency basis?
Yeah. The important thing about what we do in terms of our fees is you don't have to pay us anything up front. We advance our time, we advance our money, and our money can be spent on costs of investigation and also costs on trying to tease out and support and prove the injury. All this is done on the lawyer's, from the lawyer's pocket. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, when money is collected, when compensation is achieved, when the wrongdoer has been made accountable and the client is compensated, we get paid through a contingency fee. That's really what I call a success fee. If we're successful, we get paid. If we're not successful, you don't have to pay us for the money we've spent or the time we've spent on your case.
Lots of helpful info today, Claude, as usual. Thank you so much. I'm sure we could talk a lot more about this, but thank you for taking some time to help us out today.
Rob, it's always great to talk to you and great to see you on those rare occasions that I get to see you in person. I wish you and your family great safety and great sanity during this crazy time.
Same to you, buddy. Be safe. That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been attorney Claude Wyle from San Francisco. If you want the best information or you're ready to choose a lawyer that lawyers choose, make sure to go to askthelawyer.com. Also, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe by clicking on the button below. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with askthelawyer.com.